It was Christmas Eve, December 24th, and the house was adorned with twinkling lights. The scent of French toast filled the air, but the joy was merely a facade. Upon opening the door, I found a note on the table. "Kaio, I've left. Take care of your father." With a shattered heart, I realized my wife had departed without a backward glance, leaving me alone with my father-in-law, whom I barely knew. The clock read 7:45 p.m., and the weight of solitude fell upon me like an unyielding cold snow. My name is Kaio. I don't know how I'm going to face this. I sat at the dining table, looking at the Christmas decorations that Helena had lovingly set up. The blinking lights and colorful ornaments now seemed to mock me, a reminder of what once was a time of happiness. Clara, my daughter, was in her room, and the silence that enveloped the house was deafening. I wanted to scream, but the words simply wouldn't come out. What would I even say? Where would I begin to explain to her that her mother was no longer here? The image of little Clara, with her bright eyes and innocent smile, gnawed at me from within. I knew she would miss Helena, and that thought troubled me even more. I went to her room but hesitated at the door. I wasn't sure how to comfort her or what to say without drowning in sadness myself. Sergio, my father-in-law, appeared in the living room, his face serious and worried. He tried to smile, but the expression didn't convince. The man who had once been an authority figure in my life now seemed as lost as I was. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice tinged with hesitation. I shook my head, unable to articulate a response. The truth was, neither of us was okay, and he knew it. "We need to talk about this," he insisted, leading me to a corner of the room, away from the lights and memories. "Did she say anything before she left?" Sergio asked, his frustration evident. "Didn't you notice anything, Kaio?" A knot grew in my throat. I really hadn't noticed. We were so wrapped up in our daily routines that the emotional distance between us felt invisible until that moment. "No, I thought everything was fine," I confessed, the weight of guilt suffocating me. What could I have done differently? Sergio sighed, his gaze distant. "Sometimes we don't see the signs. Life deceives us with routine." I looked at him, and part of me wanted to shout that he should have noticed too, but I also understood that the blame wasn't solely his. Helena and I had let our communication deteriorate over the years. What could I do now, other than deal with the pain? The evening dragged on, and the tense atmosphere between us was almost palpable. Clara appeared, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Where's Mommy?" she asked, her innocence shining through every word. I swallowed hard, the answer stuck in my throat. What could I say to a child? I didn't know how to describe her mother's departure without breaking her little heart. I looked at Sergio, hoping he could help me, but he seemed as helpless as I felt. She went on a trip," I said, the lie slipping easily from my lips, as if it were the only way to avoid the cruel truth. Clara frowned, clearly dissatisfied. "When is she coming back?" Her question cut through my heart. "I don't know, sweetheart," I replied, the pain of knowing that was a lie almost unbearable. The next morning arrived, but the sadness still lingered in the air. Breakfast was silent, only the clinking of cups and utensils breaking the awkward quiet. Sergio tried to bring up happy memories of Christmases past, but his attempts fell flat. Clara wasn't interested in cheerful tales. She was in a state of denial, as if the weight of reality was too much to bear. I just watched her, seeing her poke at her cereal with the same lack of enthusiasm I felt about facing the day. After finishing, I decided I needed to do something, even if it was just a small task. I stood up to tidy the living room, but Sergio stopped me. "It's not the time to work, Kaio. We need to support each other," he said with a firmness that hadn't been there the night before. Those words resonated with me. I needed support. Clara did too. Facing Helena's absence wasn't something we should do alone. Yet, as I looked at the Christmas tree, an idea began to form in my mind. Let's do something together, I suggested hesitantly. Let's put up the ornaments or maybe bake some cookies. What do you think? Clara looked up and a small smile appeared on her lips. Can we make the chocolate cookies Mommy always made? The mention of Helena made her light up a bit, and I knew this was a great idea. Sergio also seemed intrigued by the proposal. We can do that. Let's try to bring a little joy back into the house, he agreed, his expression beginning to brighten with newfound determination. We gathered the ingredients and started working together in the kitchen, the mix of sugar and butter bringing a sense of normalcy that we desperately needed. As Clara enthusiastically stirred the dough, Sergio and I exchanged meaningful glances, both recognizing that even amidst the pain, there was still space for hope and rebuilding. Gradually, the house began to resonate with laughter and the sweet smell of cookies baking. The act of cooking became a small ritual of healing, a step in the right direction. The void left by Helena was still present, but in that moment, within our kitchen, we began to create new memories, however slow and tortuous they might be. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but as Clara laughed and helped decorate the cookies, I realized there might still be a way to rebuild our family, even amidst the chaos. As Clara and I finished decorating the cookies, a sense of hope began to bloom in my heart. The aroma of vanilla and chocolate lingered in the air, mixing with the bittersweet memory of Helena. The kitchen was filled with laughter, but the absence of her mother was a shadow that couldn't be ignored. Each time Clara looked at me, her eyes reflected a mix of joy and sadness, and I felt powerless to heal her suffering. After we finished the cookies, we decided to head to the market to buy some things for Christmas dinner. The idea of preparing a special meal seemed like a good way to distract ourselves and, at the same time, do something together. When we arrived at the market, Clara was enchanted by the Christmas lights hanging and the music playing softly in the background. I watched her as she ran from one end to the other, admiring the decorations and toys. Her smile was contagious, and I tried to match that brightness, but it was a challenge. The memory of Helena was still very fresh in my mind. Sergio, my father-in-law, had become a constant presence in the past few days. He always had a pragmatic way of dealing with things, and his company was a foundation I didn't know I needed. While we were at the market, he sent me a message asking if I needed help. I replied that everything was under control, but the truth was, a little support wouldn't hurt. When we got home, he was already in the kitchen, preparing a dish Helena used to make, but that I had never dared to try. Seeing him stir the pots filled me with a mix of nostalgia and gratitude. Here was a man who also mourns the absence of his daughter, but was willing to stand by my side. "Can I help with anything?" I asked, trying to be useful. Sergio turned and smiled, a sad but encouraging smile. "Of course, Caio. Come chop the vegetables." As we worked together, we talked about the Christmas traditions Helena used to uphold. Sergio shared funny and touching stories, and I realized that even with the pain we felt, there was a bond that united us even more. Clara entered the kitchen with a radiant smile, holding a small ornament she had found at the market. "Daddy, look what I brought. Can we hang it on the tree?" Her question made me realize how important it was to create a new meaning for the festivities. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's do that right now." We helped Clara place the ornament on the tree, and as we looked at the other decorations, I noticed a blend of good and bad memories. Each ornament represented moments from our history, and now, in this new setting, we were ready to add new chapters. Night fell, and the table was set, illuminated by candles that Clara and I had created together. The meal was delicious, and conversation flowed naturally, even with the memories of Helena lingering between us like a gentle breeze. Clara excitedly talked about what she wanted to ask Santa Claus for, her little fantasies filling the air with a new kind of joy. Sergio and I exchanged knowing glances, as if we were accomplices in a silent plan to protect that beautiful and innocent child, who deserved a magical Christmas, even if the circumstances were different from what we had hoped. As soon as the meal was over, Clara asked if we could sing some Christmas songs. Joining her in that little performance was one of the most emotional moments I had ever experienced. She sang with such passion that I felt like I was going back in time to those Christmases when everything seemed perfect. Listening to her voice echo through the house, I realized that music had the power to unite our hearts, even in the darkest hours. Sergio, visibly moved, joined us, and together we created an improvised harmony that resonated throughout the home. Later, as Clara prepared for bed, I sat on the couch with Sergio, both of us exhausted but with a sense of satisfaction. The atmosphere felt lighter, and the idea that, despite everything, we were still a family began to take root in my heart. You know, Caio, Sergio began, Helena might not be here, but that doesn't mean we should let sadness dominate our lives. We need to move forward, for Clara. I nodded, feeling that those words were a powerful reminder that love still existed, even amidst the pain. Before bed, I went to Clara's room and found her with her eyes closed, a peaceful expression on her face. I leaned in to kiss her forehead and whispered, "I love you, my little star." As I stepped away, a wave of hope enveloped me. Maybe Christmas wouldn't be what I expected, but the strength I felt growing between me, Clara, and Sergio was a sign that we could face any storm together. As I closed the door to her room, I realized that this was just the first night of many in which we would build new memories, and that the love that united us was much greater than the absences we carried. If you resonated with our story and want to follow Caio and his family's journey, subscribe for more updates. Together, we can explore the complexities of love, loss, and hope. The night dragged on, and Helena's absence seemed to spread through the house like a ghost. As Clara settled into her room, struggling to comprehend the new reality, I tried to find meaning in the chaos that had settled in. The sound of silence was deafening, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was something I could have done to prevent this separation. Sergio, my father-in-law, seemed as lost as I was, though he tried to maintain composure. He sat in the living room, hands clasped and gaze distant, as if replaying the family's history in his mind. The weight of the moment was palpable, and I knew that together we would have to face not only the pain of absence, but also the burden of the expectations surrounding us. The next day, the sun streamed through the window, bringing a light that felt almost unreal. Clara woke up with a sleepy expression, but upon seeing my face, her eyes lit up. It was as if she was trying to comfort me. I went to the kitchen, and Sergio was already there, making coffee that felt more like a survival ritual. "We need to be strong, Caio," he said, his voice carrying a resolute tone. Those words echoed in my mind, but I still didn't know what that strength would look like. The first family meal after Helena's departure was strange, marked by a silence that seemed to scream. Conversations about trivial matters were frustrated attempts to hide what truly affected us. While we had coffee, Clara began to ask about her mother, her words coming out with the innocence of a child who doesn't fully grasp the gravity of what was happening. "When is Mommy coming home?" she asked, looking at me with those eyes I loved so much. Each time she mentioned Helena, a sharp pain formed in my chest, and I hesitated before answering. She needs some time, sweetheart," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. Clara's face fell, and I realized that the truth was much harder to swallow than any lie I could make up. The void of her absence hovered over us like a heavy cloud, and I wished I could do something to ease my daughter's pain. After coffee, Sergio suggested we do something together, something to distract us from the sadness. "Let's take a walk in the park, maybe that will help," he said, and I agreed, even though I wasn't sure I was ready to face the outside world. We put on our coats, and as we stepped out, the cold air hit me like a slap in the face. Clara seemed excited, pulling us forward, and I wondered if her energy could be contagious. As we walked, I observed the trees, now bare, and remembered the stories Helena used to tell about the magic of Christmas. The contrast between my reality and the memories of the past was striking, but I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for Clara and Sergio. The park was full of families, and the laughter of children was a constant reminder of what had been lost. Clara wandered off a bit, chasing after a passing dog, and I could see the smile on her face, even if just for a brief moment. That scene was a breath of hope amid the pain. Sergio approached me and, with a serious look, commented, "We should remember what we still have, Caio. We can't let Helena's absence drag us down." His words, although simple, resonated deeply within me. It was a reminder that, despite Helena's absence, we were still a family, and it was our duty to care for one another. While Clara played, Sergio and I found a bench and sat down, observing life around us. He began to talk about the times he was young, how he and Helena used to spend weekends in the park, and how life changed quickly, often without warning. "We need to adapt, Caio. Life is like that," he said, with a look of understanding. I tried to absorb his words, but the sadness still consumed me. The memory of Helena's smile and the way she lit up our home were hard to ignore. The world kept turning, and I was there, stuck in a moment that felt endless. We returned home, and the atmosphere was still tense. Clara, with a smile on her lips, brought in some drawings she had made at the park, proud of her creations. Looking at those colorful scribbles, I realized that even though I was trying to rebuild our life without Helena, there was still beauty in the simplicity of the moments we shared. Clara's childhood innocence reminded us that there was hope, even in the most difficult situations. Night fell slowly, and as we prepared dinner, Sergio offered to help, as if trying to keep us occupied. The kitchen, once a place of family unity, was now becoming a space of resistance and renewal. Sitting at the table, with simple dishes before us, a comfortable silence settled in. Clara talked about what she wanted to do in school, her ambitions to be an artist, and how she loved to draw. Hearing her voice was a balm for the pain we felt, and I realized that, despite everything, there was still room for dreams and new stories to be told. Sergio and I exchanged knowing glances, recognizing the battle we were fighting together. Helena's absence was still a weight on our hearts, but in that moment, Clara's presence united us in a way I hadn't expected. At the end of the meal, Clara grew excited talking about the upcoming Christmas, and for the first time, I felt a pang of hope. It was as if, even amidst the pain, the spirit of Christmas was still present, trying to rescue us from our shadows. As I helped Clara clear the table, an idea began to form in my mind. What if the three of us started creating new traditions? Christmas didn't have to be just a reminder of what we lost. It could be a moment of renewal, an opportunity to celebrate the life we still had. And so, in that shattered home, a new beginning started to take shape, like a rebirth amidst the sadness. The idea of creating new traditions filled me with an unexpected energy. I looked at Clara, who still seemed lost in thought, and at Sergio, who was watching the scene with a mixed expression of sadness and hope. I decided it was time to act. "Let's prepare something special for tonight," I said, trying to sound optimistic. Clara perked up, her curious gaze reflecting a hint of excitement. "What do you have in mind, Dad?" she asked, and I realized this was my moment to reclaim not just Christmas, but the connection we were losing. I went to the kitchen and began to explore the shelves, remembering the recipes Helena used to make. Among the ingredients I found, I decided to prepare a simple but meaningful dish: a roasted turkey seasoned with herbs Helena loved. As I chopped the vegetables, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. I remembered the smell of the food she used to prepare, the way her laughter filled the house. But at the same time, I realized I couldn't let those memories consume me. It was time to create new memories. Sergio entered the kitchen, bringing a bottle of wine and a look of encouragement. "You've always been good in the kitchen, Caio. And remember, she may not be here, but that doesn't mean we can't find joy together," he said as he helped me peel the potatoes. The teamwork began to flow, and soon the kitchen was filled with aromas and sounds, a small symphony amid the emotional chaos we were facing. As the turkey roasted, I remembered the Christmas songs we used to listen to as a family. "Clara, do you remember that song you always asked us to play?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment, but soon her eyes lit up. "Yes, the one about the spirit of Christmas," she replied with a shy smile. I rushed to the sound system and played the song. The melody filled the air, and for a brief moment, the sadness seemed to dissipate, making way for a new hope. Sergio and I began to sing along with the song, and Clara, even though initially reluctant, eventually joined us. The joy emanating from us was contagious, and as our voices intertwined, I realized we were starting to heal our wounds, albeit slowly. Laughter and music were powerful antidotes against the pain surrounding us. Each note brought us a step closer to the unity we thought we had lost forever. When the food was finally ready, I sat down at the table with Clara and Sergio, observing what we had created together. The golden turkey at the center of the table seemed a symbol of rebirth, and the colorful potatoes and vegetables surrounding it served as a reminder that even in difficult times, life could be flavorful and full of nuances. "Merry Christmas," I said, raising my glass. Clara did the same, and Sergio, with a proud smile, raised his as well. "Merry Christmas, Dad," Clara said, her voice filled with emotion. The simple act of sharing a meal together seemed to reclaim something we thought was lost. We talked about joyful moments from the past, shared laughs, and suddenly, Helena's absence didn't seem so oppressive. The energy in the air was different. There was a warmth that hadn't existed before, a space for the hope of a better future. As the night wore on, Sergio stood up and brought out some old photos of Helena, moments that captured her radiant smile and the joy she brought to our lives. "She was always the light of our lives," Sergio said, with a nostalgic glint in his eyes. I looked at Clara, who was observing the photos with a mix of sadness and admiration. "She's still with us, in our hearts," I added, trying to comfort my daughter. It was true. Even with the pain of absence, Helena's memories continued to bind us together. After a while, Clara suggested we do something different. "What if we make a tribute for Mommy, Dad? Something that shows her we're thinking of her," she said, her eyes shining. The idea was sweet and touching. I nodded in agreement, and together, we decided to write letters to Helena. The words flowed out like an emotional thread. And I realized I was releasing feelings that had been trapped inside me for too long. Clara settled into the corner of the table, a notebook in hand and a pen, her little hands trembling slightly as she wrote. I watched her, admiring her courage. What I didn't know was that this simple activity would bring us a sense of relief and connection. "Mom, you were always the best," Clara wrote, and I could see tears welling in her eyes. My heart ached, and I remembered the importance of giving space to grief, even in the midst of celebration. When we finished our letters, we decided it would be nice to read one to the other. "I want you to know you will always be my hero," I began, my voice cracking. Clara smiled, even with tears streaming down her face. When it was her turn, she read aloud, and the words that came from her mouth were like a gentle melody filling the room. "I miss you every day, Mommy," she said, and her outpouring echoed in my heart. After sharing our letters, we decided it would be good to have a small ceremony. We took the papers to the backyard and placed them in a wooden box that Helena used to keep her memories. "This box is our home for her memories," I explained to Clara, as Sergio lit a candle beside us. "This way, she will always be with us." The candlelight danced in the wind, and the scent of Christmas began to mix with the cool evening breeze. "Let's make this moment a tradition," I suggested, feeling that by doing so, we were truly honoring Helena's memory. Clara nodded, her eyes sparkling with the new idea, and Sergio smiled, realizing that even amid the pain, we were creating something beautiful. The night ended with a tight embrace between the three of us, a symbol of our new unity. Deep down, the wound caused by Helena's departure would never fully heal, but the pain was now intertwined with the hope of a future we could build together. And so, as the Christmas bells rang in the distance, I realized that the true spirit of Christmas wasn't perfection, but the capacity to love, forgive, and move forward together. Life began to unfold in a new rhythm after that Christmas. As the days passed, I noticed that Sergio and I needed to support each other more than ever. He, who had always been a strong man full of opinions, now seemed as lost as I was. The void left by Helena was not just a matter of physical presence. It was an absence echoing in every corner of the house and in the small things of daily life. Clara felt it too, and it was by looking at her face with those sad eyes constantly searching for her mother that I realized we had to be there for one another. Sometimes, when night fell, I found her sitting on the couch staring into space, an unfinished drawing in her lap. It was painful to see my little girl grappling with something so large. On one of those occasions, I decided we needed a fresh start. I invited Clara for a walk in the park, a place we used to go as a family. The idea of reliving those memories could be painful, but it also had the potential to help us find new meaning in what remained. When we arrived, the park was filled with laughing children, running and playing. Those joyful sounds, which had once been part of our lives, felt like a distant echo. Clara hesitated for a moment, but I encouraged her to go to the swings. The smile that broke out on her face while swinging brought a bit of life to that gray day. As I pushed her, I started talking about simple things, like the importance of the trees there and how the leaves change color with the seasons. She began to open up a bit more, sharing about her days at school and the new friends she had made, though there was still a slight touch of sadness in her voice. Over the week, those small moments multiplied. Sergio, who had seemed so distant before, began to engage in everyday activities. He made breakfast more often and offered to help Clara with her homework. Sometimes, when I came home after a long day, I found him on the couch, laughing and playing with her. That gave me a new boost. It was as if his presence, even without Helena, was starting to create a new kind of family. We even began planning some movie nights, where we would gather with popcorn and blankets, trying to find joy in the new configuration our lives had taken. However, the memory of Helena didn't fade away. Sometimes I imagined her, wondering if she would be happy, if she had found what she was looking for by leaving. Those questions left me restless. The feeling of abandonment weighed on my heart like a burden, but life around me continued. One day, during a conversation with Sergio, he surprised me by sharing his own pain regarding Helena's departure. He talked about how guilty he felt for not having noticed what was happening, as if he were a failing father. Hearing his words made me realize that the pain wasn't just mine. It was a collective pain that also involved Clara, who was there, between us, trying to find her place. Those conversations helped open a space between us, allowing us to talk about how we really felt. Sergio began to tell stories of his youth, and I, in turn, shared memories of happy moments I spent with Helena. I discovered that memories could be a balm for the pain, allowing the past and present to coexist in a way that didn't paralyze us. By recalling good moments, we found a way to honor what had been, without letting it define who we were now. As time passed, Clara became increasingly willing to talk about her mother. One afternoon, while we were sitting at the table, she directly asked about Helena. I felt a chill in my stomach, but I realized that was an opportunity to be honest. I explained that even though Helena wasn't physically present, she still loved her and always would. Clara listened attentively, and in her eyes I could see a mix of sadness and understanding. I spoke about the importance of memory and how, even when someone leaves, the good moments we lived with that person remain alive within us. Those words seemed to bring Clara a bit of comfort, and she began to draw more frequently. One day, while looking at her drawings, I noticed she had made an illustration of our family. In the center was a big sun, and around it were little drawings of me, her, and her mother. Instead of feeling sad, the image brought me an unexpected peace. It was as if Clara were trying to piece together her own reality, creating a space where we all could coexist. As the months went by, the pain of Helena's absence began to transform into a different kind of longing, something lighter, more comforting. The love we still had for her hadn't vanished, but adapted, becoming part of our new story. And so, little by little, Sergio and I, alongside Clara, learned to navigate daily challenges, to laugh again, and to find joy in the little things. Life went on, and although Helena was no longer with us, the journey of healing and reconnection was just the beginning of a new chapter. If you have also experienced something like this, or had to face the absence of someone special, share your stories. We all have something to learn from each other's experiences, and together we can find light in the shadows. Time passed, and each day felt like a constant struggle between acceptance and denial. Christmas, which had always been a celebration filled with laughter and warmth, was now a painful reminder of Helena's absence. At home, the decorations still hung on the walls, as if the festive spirit insisted on staying, even when real life said otherwise. Clara was adjusting to this new reality, but the sadness in her eyes was unmistakable. I tried to be strong for her, but often, when I saw her looking out the window, waiting for her mother to return, my heart would break. Sergio had become a constant presence in our daily lives, a bastion of support amid the emotional chaos. He tried to encourage me, offering advice and support, but there were moments when his words sounded empty, as if he were as lost as I was. He missed Helena too, and together we shared a silence that spoke more than 1,000 words could express. It was a tacit understanding, a connection forged by the pain we both carried. One afternoon, while trying to organize some things in Clara's room, I found a box full of old photos. Immediately, a whirlwind of memories flooded my mind. There were pictures of when Clara was a baby, moments of family happiness that now felt so distant. I looked at one specific image, Helena smiling, holding Clara in her arms, both radiant. The sight of Helena's smile transformed into an exposed wound in my chest, and for a moment, anger and sadness intertwined. Why did she leave? What had caused this rupture between us? I decided I couldn't let myself be consumed by pain. It was time to act, to seek the healing I so desperately wanted, not just for myself, but also for Clara and Sergio. With that determination, I called Clara to sit beside me. She looked at me, a mix of expectation and confusion in her eyes. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about your mother," I said, trying to find the right words. Her expression instantly darkened. "Daddy, I miss her so much. Why doesn't she come back?" The question caught me off guard, and I knew I didn't have an easy answer. Sometimes people make decisions we can't understand, but that doesn't change how much you love her, and that's what really matters. "I miss her too," I confessed, allowing a tear to roll down my face. Clara moved closer and hugged me tightly. In that moment, I realized our love could be a beacon amid the darkness. In the days that followed, Sergio and I decided to do something different to try to reclaim a bit of the joy that had disappeared. On a whim, I suggested we organize a small Christmas celebration, even if a bit late. The idea was to reignite the light that had dimmed in our home. Sergio agreed, and we began planning a simple but special dinner for the three of us. We went to the market together, and even amidst the sadness, Clara's laughter echoed as she helped choose decorations and ingredients. On the eve of our little Christmas, the kitchen was filled with delicious smells and lively sounds. Clara was excited, and that gave me a new boost. We were together, creating new memories. As we cooked, Sergio told me stories about Helena when she was a child. Each tale brought a piece of her back to life, and I realized that even in her absence, her presence was still strong in our memories. When the night finally arrived, we sat down at the table, each of us reflecting on everything we had lived through. Clara looked at the plate and then at us with a hopeful expression. "I think Mommy would like this," she said with a shy smile. My heart warmed at hearing her speak like that, recognizing that Helena's essence was still alive in Clara. The dinner was filled with conversation, laughter, and, of course, some tears. But by the end of the night, there was a palpable sense that we were beginning to rise again. However, the night wouldn't end without one more surprise. As we were clearing the table, the sound of a doorbell echoed through the house. I looked at Sergio and Clara, who also exchanged confused glances. Who could it be? The doubt hung in the air as I walked to the door. I opened it, and to my complete surprise, there stood Helena. The world around me stopped for a moment, and the weight of the absence we had been carrying became almost unbearable. She looked different, thinner, with an expression that spoke of regret. The words felt stuck in my throat, but before I could react, Clara dashed towards her, arms wide open. The scene was a mix of joy and confusion. What would happen next? The only certainty I had was that, regardless of what unfolded, that moment would mark the beginning of a new phase. Life had taught us about pain, but also about the ability to start over, and with a deep sigh, I realized that perhaps there was still hope. As I watched Clara get swept up in the moment, my mind raced. What would I say to Helena? How could I explain the pain she had caused? However, the sight of Clara, so innocent and full of love, made me hesitate. What more could I do but allow her to feel that joy, even if it was fraught with uncertainty? Anger and hurt tangled in my heart, but at the same time, the love I felt for Clara urged me to give the woman who was still her mother a second chance. Helena crouched down to look into Clara's eyes, and I saw tears welling in her gaze. "My love, I'm back," she said, her voice choked. Clara smiled, and in that moment, time seemed to stand still. The embrace between mother and daughter was a symbol of hope and new beginnings. At first, I hesitated to step forward, but the strength of that reunion propelled me. I ran my fingers through Clara's hair, watching the scene play out with a mix of emotions. "Helena, we need to talk," I said, the tension in the air palpable. Her eyes met mine, and I knew this was the beginning of a conversation that would require courage from both of us. Life had separated us, but now that we were together again, we had the opportunity to rebuild, not just what had been lost, but to create a new understanding. And so, with a heavy but hopeful heart, I prepared to face whatever would come next, believing that even in the shadows, there was still space for light.